In this second sermon, for this week and 3 more weeks after that, I'm going to be speaking on a specific subject, and the subject that I'm going to be talking about is social media. Yeah, and it's a 4-parter, and you got to stick around for the whole 4 weeks, inshallah, or at least catch it online, because we're not gonna. You have to get the full breadth of what I'm trying to say. But we're going to be looking at social media, and in particular, its impact. Its impact on children, its impact on youth, its impact on adults, its impact on families, and what it does, and then its impact on society as well, because everything is connected, as we know, right? Today you find that nearly every person, right, regardless of age, is connected in some form of social media, right? Today we're going to be talking a little bit about statistics only, but it's quite mind-blowing when we talk about social media. And I know that oftentimes we consider this to be a youngster problem. But really, if you were to look at your own life and how much time you spend on your gadgets, no matter how old you are, it shows you the effect that social media is having. Now, today we're going to just be defining a few things and giving some statistics. So when we talk about social media, what are we talking about? So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and there are many definitions, but I just picked this one, social media are forms of electronic communication, through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content such as videos. Okay? So let me read that definition again, because you see how wide that definition is, right? Social media are forms of electronic communication through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content such as videos. So this is the definition of social media. But what are some examples of social media? One of the most popular examples of social media we have is Facebook. Right? Facebook, according to some accounts, nearly have 2 billion people who are on it. 1.59 is the lower number I read. I read somewhere as high as 2 billion people. That's a lot of people, right, who are on this social media network. Another one that sometimes is debated whether or not it can be considered as social media is WhatsApp, right? Now, I know a lot of the elders here is like, well, I'm not on Facebook. Well, you're on WhatsApp, though, yeah, because I get your messages, right? There are over 1 billion users on WhatsApp. Now the discussion or the debate really is WhatsApp, is it considered to be a social media application, or is it considered to be a social networking application? And there's a difference in language or definition in that. But however, if I begin to use WhatsApp simply as a forwarding tool, which many of us do, right? I get a video, I blast it out to 30 people. I get a video, I send it out to these many people. I'm no longer saying, Salam Sheikh, how are you doing? But I'm just blasting messages. When I begin to use it in group formats, the way we do with our own families, the way we do, and when I begin to blast out messages, WhatsApp now is no longer considered to be a social networking app. It is rather a social media app, because I'm trying to convey messages to people using this network. You take that into consideration, majority of us here are using some form of social media. Other examples of social media include YouTube, right? Because you're sharing content that way. Many of us go onto YouTube, right, to see what's happening. Other ones that are a little bit younger than my generation, but people do use it, is things like Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. And part of social media is video gaming, right? Video gaming is when people play video games, but they're connected and playing against somebody else. It's an entire, it's a huge business. I don't think we realize, right? Like, I didn't realize until I was doing research on this. They actually have video gaming Olympics, basically, right? And 40,000 people come into a stadium to watch other people game. Imagine that. Right? You're not coming to watch a football game. You're not coming to watch you're coming to watch people on a computer playing a video game, right? That's how much people follow through with this. Now, how many people use it? We are told as of 2017, nearly 2.5 billion people use some form of social networking. or social media. 2.5 billion people in the world. In North America is the highest usage of social media. 70% of the population have at least one social account. 70%. That means in this room, 7 out of 10 of us have some form of account. And I think that number is higher the more wealth a community has. Because that number begins to get lower when people don't have internet connection, for example. Right? When people don't have data, for example, so they're not limited in what they can do. But when you have a community that's prosperous, the way our community, alhamdulillah, is prosperous, I would say that number of 70% is much higher. And globally, the percentage is about 42%. And again, the reason why it has to do with economics. It has to do with finances. When you take the poorer countries and you take the wealthier countries and you bring them all together, naturally you're going to have a mean that comes down. So we've talked about what is social media, examples of social media, and how many people use it. How much time do people spend on it? Now this is also very, very interesting. Okay, 16 to 24-year-olds spend on average 3.5 hours a day on social media. 3.5 hours, a day. Okay, imagine that, right? That's like you watching 2 movies back to back, right? That's how long it is, right? 25 to 34-year-olds, which is the millennial generation, spend about 3 hours a day on social media, right? 3 hours a day. And again, sometimes I feel like these numbers are low, but this is the average. We're taking the average mean here. So again, 16 to 24, which is considered the generation I generation, they spend about 3.5 hours medium on social media. 25 to 34 spend 3 hours a day. 35 to 44 spend 2.5 hours a day. And 45 to 54 spend 2 hours a day on social media. And I think once you become retired, you go even higher. You know, they didn't give me those numbers because I'm serious. Like I get messages from all of you at different times of the night and day, you know, and it just shows how much we are connected to this device. Now I want us just to think about those numbers, right? And again, like I said, when the parents aren't involved, the numbers will be higher. When the parents allow their children to have devices at a very young age, those numbers will be higher. When the parents don't control where their children use their devices, those numbers will be higher. And we're going to talk about all of this as the weeks progress. But I want us to imagine something or understand something, that when someone spends so much time on something, like 3 hours a day on social media, there is no way we can deny the impact that has on that individual. There's no way we can deny it. Let's just look at other examples. If you were to spend 3.5 hours a day reading Quran, imagine that, yeah? Never have a Maulana asked you to do that, yeah? But just imagine, if you just spend that much time reading Quran, how good you would be at Quran, yeah? Imagine if you spend 3.5 hours in the gym, yeah? How big you would become, right? How well toned you would become, because that's a lot of time, right? Now imagine you take that same time and you're just on your device the entire time, right? This is a problem that we're facing, right? You know, just talking to my own personal family, we all think that we are some way addicted to social media. Right? We'll look at the numbers. The numbers are mind-blowing as we continue this discussion. But just one that I remember offhand, and we'll talk about it next week, I think, that on average, an individual, especially the younger individuals, they check their phone 150 times a day. 150 times. And majority of the time, there's nothing telling them to check it except for their brain. Right? There's a huge impact on this. This is a really important subject, right? And today I just wanted to lay the groundwork or lay the discussion about how powerful social media is. And as we will go on, you will see that this is a deliberate attempt that has been made by programmers and by social media companies to trap us, so that we will always feel needy towards these particular apps. And then, inshallah, in the 4th week, we're going to discuss how to fix this problem to the best extent that we can, because many of us, I think, are very much enthralled in it. last week, we talked about social media, and we talked about what is social media, and we gave examples of social media or social networking sites, and we gave statistics regarding its usage. I think one of the points that I want to get across today, and again, these are points that come to us from experts in this field, is that the way social media is geared, or the way social media is developed, it is created to be addictive, right? It is created to be addictive, just the way cigarettes were created to be addictive. Other drugs are created to be addictive. Social media, in many ways, has been created with that same mindset, because we have to realize that these social media sites or these social networking sites, the way they make money is when more people spend more time on that site. Right? This way they can show that, look, this is how much people spend. Advertisers will pay them to be on those sites, and thus they generate money this way. And so there are a couple of things that I just want to mention to make us recognize that, look, we're being duped sometimes into thinking we're doing something good, but in reality we're wasting a tremendous amount of precious resources like time, memory, and other things that can be falling apart. According to insiders, they say that behind every screen on your phone, there are literally thousands of engineers who have worked on this thing to try to make it maximally addicting, they say. Thousands of engineers have spent on it. And one of the features that they talk about is the infinite scroll. Yeah? If you notice this, right? So if you're on social media, whatever that app is or whatever you use, when you scroll, it never stops scrolling. Right? It just keeps going and going and going. And the example that they give is that of a plate of food, for example. When you eat a plate of food, that plate of food, once it finishes. But it says, imagine a plate of food that replenishes on its own. You would keep eating that plate of food. To give another example, why shisha is so bad, right? Because if somebody, for example, I'm not saying the cigarettes are better, but I'm saying that if somebody smokes a cigarette, after that cigarette is done, they put it out. But a shisha never really gets done. You smoke for an hour and a half, and it keeps going. And so you end up smoking a lot more of that because your mind just continues to go. Social media has created their platforms in this way. If, for example, I were to scroll on my phone and it would say loading, immediately I would just say, forget it, I don't want to wait for that to load. But the fact that they continue to let it scroll, what they say is that if you don't give your brain time to catch up with your impulses, you just keep scrolling. And I want you to look at yourselves when you go to social media. You'll say, I'll only go 5 minutes. And then you just keep scrolling. And at the end of it, you'll see that nearly 25, 30, 35, 40 minutes have passed by of you just scrolling infinitely because your brain can't catch up with that impulse that, hey, I got to stop doing this. So you find that the way they've created this, and as adults, maybe we're more able or capable of saying, okay, I got to stop. But imagine a young person, a youth, right, who hasn't fully developed that capacity. They've been trapped into the system where they just feel like they need to continue using. Another feature that social media sites use is the like function, right? Where you can like other people's posts and people can like your posts. And I think it was Facebook who started this, and then everybody else picked it up. Instagram, Snapchat, everybody picked it up. Why? Because it's tapping into the most basic human tendency of wanting to be liked. Yeah, we all want to be liked, right? We all want people to say, "MashaAllah, great lecture." And when somebody says, "Not a good lecture," I don't want to talk to you anymore, right? We all want to be liked, and because of this nature of human beings, we want to constantly post things, not because it's important, because I want to see how many likes I will get. Right? I will like other people's posts, not because I liked what they had to say, because I want them to like me. Right? And not only is this tendency strong in human beings, but the fact that I'll keep going back to my social media page just to see how many people liked what I posted. Right? Like, let me check who liked it. These are things that are very simple, right? Like, some people are looking at me like, what? But others are looking at me like, no, I understand. Yeah, this is a very humanistic tendency, and it's amazing that we're sometimes naive to this. But this is how they basically trap us. And another third point, and then we'll just end today on this to show us that, look, they're strategically gearing towards capturing our minds and our hearts and our attention. That another feature that they use is by specifically using a color scheme to grab our attention, right? Colors have a tremendous impact. There's an entire study on colors, how marketing companies pick a color for a company to capture the attention of people. Just Google it, marketing in colors, and you'll see an entire chart of which companies use what because they want a specific intended target to come from that. But you find that a lot of social media sites will use the color blue. Right? Facebook uses blue, LinkedIn uses blue, Twitter uses blue, because blue is generally associated with dependability and trust. You feel like I'm going somewhere good. Yeah, that's what the mind tricks you to think, that you see something blue and you'll go to it. And also on top of that, they will use notifications in red, right? So whenever you have a message, it will pop up in red. The reason why they do that is because red makes you feel like you have to do something. Okay? It's an emergency. You gotta pop up. Let me immediately go and check what it is. It's an amazing marketing tool that they have used to really entrap people. And as we see, there are over nearly 3 million people addicted or on social media. Many of them will say that they're not addicted, but in reality, they spend so much time on there that it proves that they are addicted. Inshallah, next week, if God gives us life, we're going to be talking about the effects of social media that we will see in our lives and in our children. And then the fourth week, we'll talk about how to fix this problem, inshallah, if we find ourselves to be addicted. For the past few weeks in the second sermon, we've been talking about the addictive nature of social media, and I want to continue that discussion today. Last week in particular, we talked about how engineers behind social networking sites and social networking apps do everything that they can to ensure the maximum usage of their products, and thus they create it in a very addictive manner. And we talked about some examples of that last week. There's no doubt that anything that we utilize too much of will have an effect on our lives. And today I want to talk about some of the effects, but also in particular the greatest victims to this, and this is our youth, right? Our children. Now, I'm not saying that we're not exempt from this. I think many of these things will also apply to us. But we see the greatest impact leading to some very tragic results, really, when we talk about the effect of social media on youth. We've already said that in the past, we've said it in the past, that according to statistics, a youth between the ages of 16 to 35 spends an average of over 3 hours a day on social media, right? And that is a lot. Yeah, and I think that that's also very so that's on the lower side, to be quite honest, because we're counting the entire world, basically, right? And some people may not have electricity, some people may not have charging stations, they may not have different things, but for us here who have everything, I think many of us may spend quite a bit more time on social media. Statistics state that youth between that age bracket that I mentioned check their phones nearly 150 times a day. Yeah, 150 times, and most of those times there is no notification or no alert telling them to check. It's just a message from their brain telling them that they haven't done something in a while. It's very addictive, right? I'm going to use the example of smoking. I use it a lot, but it's very similar to a cigarette, right? You put a cigarette down, half an hour later, something tells you, hey, it's time for another cigarette. It's very similar to the addictive nature of social media. And interestingly, in Australia, a research was done with 3,000 youth under the age of 30, and they noticed that, I don't know what percentage, but a high percentage, or basically it says that these 3,000 youths under the age of 30 felt a high level of anxiety when their phone is about to die. So when their battery begins to get low, they begin to feel anxious, anxiety. We sometimes laugh about anxiety. We're snickering right now. I don't know how many of you have ever had an anxiety attack. It's not a joke. Yeah. In this camp that I was doing, there was this 11-year-old girl who has severe anxiety disorder. And she's had to be hospitalized numerous times because of anxiety, things that she can't control. And it gave me a whole different level of appreciation. What we're seeing here is obviously a bad addiction, but it's very similar. Again, I give a cigarette example, that as a smoker, when you're down to 2 cigarettes in your pack, all you can think about is buying the next pack. Yeah? It's no different. That your mind is on that. The mind of these children is exactly on that. Now, whatever you're addicted to, you can apply the same here. This level of connection, right, or addiction to social media will no doubt lead to tremendous effects. And today I just want to talk about these effects. The first thing is we have to keep in mind that even if we give our gadgets to our children and we time it for half an hour or an hour a day, for example, their minds will automatically want more. Yeah? If you tell your child half an hour a day, they will ask you after another hour, can I just use it a little bit more? Right? I'll use it. Or they will be anxious they can't wait to use it the next day, where they come and say, okay, it's time for me to use it. We begin to see, even in a timed and very strict and rigid format, there is an addictive nature to it, and that if one is not careful and just gives their child these gadgets, they're going to be addicted to it. So the first thing we have to realize about the effects of social media is addiction. And you'll begin to also see a gradual change in behavioral pattern in these children, right? They'll become more boisterous, they'll argue more, they'll talk back more. Depending on what they're watching or playing, they will have a different language that they will start using. Same when we see our children go to school and the effects that it has on them when they come back home. Another major issue when it comes to youth and social media is the effect of isolation. They become isolated. And what that means is that in today's day and age, our youth between that age of 16 and 35 are the most connected generations ever. Meaning that they are connected to everything and everyone. Right? They have the world of knowledge on their fingertips, basically. They know what their friends are doing. They know where their friends are hanging out. They know what their friends are liking or not liking. However, they prefer to be connected while being alone. Yeah? They don't feel the need to go out. You see, the previous generations would still like to go out. Let's go have a dinner. Let's go watch a movie. But you talk to the generations now, millennial down, especially the newest generation, the Generation I, they prefer to just sit in their room and be fully connected to everybody, but not really have any social networking skills. And therefore what you find within them, and this is not just something I'm making up, right? But you find within them that they lack basic communication skills, right? They wouldn't know how to speak to somebody. I gave an example of somebody close to me, and their child was sending out resumes for jobs, and they would get callbacks, but they didn't know what to say on the phone, and for 6 months they wouldn't pick up the phone because they didn't know how to communicate to somebody, right? These are real problems, my brothers and sisters, and we have to be real careful, right, about what we are letting our children do with these devices. Their level of addiction prevents social and outdoor activities, and it leads to poor school performance. You will see a decline in all of these things in their life. Another effect of social media is increase in cyberbullying. Now, I don't have time to go into this today, but we'll talk about bullying some other time. But I want to touch upon this last part, and that is an increased feeling of anxiety and inadequacy, which leads to depression, right? Statistics tell us, right, in North America, in America in particular, but I don't see any difference, to be quite honest, between us and them, that 1 out of 5 adolescents has a diagnosable mental health disorder. 1 out of 5 of our youth have some type of mental illness, and 1/3 of them show symptoms of depression, right? This is because of their addiction to this. Many people who have used Facebook, for example, for long, or today Snapchat or Instagram, they will talk about their addiction eventually leading towards depression because they don't feel that sense of liking that other people like other things. How come they're not liking me? We have to keep in mind, right? Like for us as adults, some of us here, it's hard for us to imagine these things, right? But imagine the frailty of the mind of a youth, right? This is why they say that whatever is sown into their hearts will grow. Imagine how the youth's mind is, and then we see these effects. These feelings of inadequacy that we talk about will lead to, sadly, often suicide, right? Suicide is the second leading cause of death between children ages of 10 to 24. Imagine that. Imagine that, right? Between the ages of 10 to 24, suicide is the second leading cause. And the suicide is because of why? They're being cyberbullied, right? They don't feel a sense of belonging anywhere. They don't feel a sense of appreciation because social media tricks us into thinking it can provide these things, but it really can't, right? There is nothing that can duplicate a hug from a parent. Yeah, there is nothing that can duplicate attention from a parent, right? And each day in the United States, there are an average of over 3,000 attempts of suicide between ages of grades 9 through 12. 3,000 a day attempt suicide. My brothers and sisters, we as a community are not immune from these things. These are not things that are happening outside. These are not things that are happening to a certain race. We are all victims of this, right? And oftentimes we're not paying enough attention to our children to recognize that there may be symptoms that they have that we can pick up on and work towards healing. The reason why I have focused on this particular subject for the past 3 weeks and will continue next week is because I see these effects when I talk to our children of the mosque. Yeah? I see this firsthand, and there's nothing that I can do on my own. We have to work on this together, and it starts with the family. Pay attention to your children. Don't give them gadgets. Yeah? Give them time. And inshallah, we will see a difference in all of our lives. For the past few weeks, we've been talking about social media. We've been talking about the addictive nature of social media. We've been talking about the effects of social media. And today in the first sermon, we talked about the effects of adult content. So what can we do, right? And I think that this is something that is very serious and an important discussion, and something that, especially if you have younger kids at home, you need to create an atmosphere within that house through dialogue to figure out what's the best way to curb this issue. Because even if you right now don't feel that you are addicted to this material or addicted to social media, just being on social media for a prolonged period of time is harmful. We've talked about that in detail. If you haven't heard it, go and listen to the previous sermons that we talked about. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to admit that it is problematic, right? That it can lead to addiction. And if we're not willing to even admit that, then that in itself is a problem, because social scientists have told us it's a problem. People who study neurology have told us it's a problem. People who create these devices, we're told that Steve Jobs wouldn't even give devices to his own children, right? The creator of Apple. Now think about that, right? He wants everybody else's kids to have it, but his own kids he wouldn't be exposing to that. There are indications and things that tell us, studies have clearly told us that it affects the way children think, that it affects the way we think. And so the first step, I think, is for us to admit that it's harmful, and it can be harmful. And I think that give yourself a test. So I can tell you honestly that starting right now until Monday, because Monday's a holiday, isn't it, right? So until Monday, I will not be on social media, right? It's a test. It's a test to see how my body and mind respond, okay? Because if I respond with agitation, if I respond with annoyance, if I respond with frustration, that's an indication that I've been addicted to social media. Okay, so if you're willing to go on a test with me, let's go on a test run. Okay, and let's just leave our social media platforms. I know WhatsApp is very hard. I'll let WhatsApp be. Okay, but as far how will my wife know where I am otherwise? But otherwise, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, 3 days. Let's do a test and see how we respond. I guarantee you that if you have a child at home who is allowed to use a tablet or a device, and if you tell them that you're not using your device today, they will act up in a tantrum. Yeah? That in itself is an indication, my brothers and sisters, that there is some connection that the brain has already switched on that's problematic. So the first thing is we have to admit there's a problem, and let's take a test to find out if we do have a problem. Okay? The second point about how to help ourselves going in the future, especially when it comes to children. I don't see why, honestly, a 12 or a 13-year-old needs a device. I don't see that. Today I see kids as young as 11, 12 have access to the iPad whenever they want. They have access to their parents' phone whenever they want. Right? Like it's almost a reflex. You're at the supermarket, your kid's acting up, give them your phone. Yeah, the kid will quiet down, you go your shopping. You're going to the mall, you give your kid the phone. I don't see why we need to give our children devices of their own. If they want to use the family device, then we have a timed way where, okay, you're getting, for example, half an hour a day. Even that, is a lot for a child. Okay? So, second thing is, don't give your children devices. I know that in today's day and age, we need to make sure our kids are safe. I don't know if they still sell flip phones, Give them a flip phone, yeah? They may get laughed at school, but they'll hide it. They won't take it out in school, but all they need is to let you know where I am and I'm coming home. They don't need anything else after that, okay? So, be careful of how we let our children use these devices. The third point is, we cannot let our children and even us, because sometimes we don't have control over our own souls, We can't let them have unlimited and unsupervised access to these devices, right? If me as an adult if I as an adult have temptation to go into things that are not allowed to me, imagine a child who's just becoming baligh right now, whose hormones are just kicking in right now. You give them unfettered access to the internet. What kind of, it doesn't make any sense what we do, right? And then we think that, no, our children, I'll do a taweez and my children will be safe. No, it doesn't work like that, right? Tie your camel, then trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So what can we do? Set parental controls. Now I know, I've had discussions with parents before. They tell me their kids are smarter than them when it comes to disabling parental controls, but set parental controls. Turn off the internet in the whole house after a certain time. Yeah? That means you don't have access to it and they don't have access to it, right? But a certain time as a family, you say 9:30, 10, internet is off. If you haven't done what you need to do, we're not doing it now. And you as well suffer through that, right? But this is the way we can help control it. Another thing, no gadgets in rooms, in your children's rooms. Absolutely not, right? You can't let your child take a gadget into their own room privately. There may come a time when your child becomes mature and then you trust them, but even then it's dangerous. But what are you going to do, right? But when it comes to children who are pre-17, a child should never be allowed to go into their room privately with their laptops, with their iPads, with tablets, with their phones, or anything like that. So they can't take them into their room. As a replacement, buy them a real alarm clock. They still sell those. I don't know if we know. But they'll say, I need an alarm clock to get... No, buy them an alarm clock. Plug it into the wall. That's how you wake up in the morning. That's how we woke up in the morning, right? Computers and tablets can only be used in living rooms or family rooms, in public areas, right? Where anybody can walk in at any time. You do your homework out here. You study out here. You use these out here. These are family rules, right? And therefore, as a family rule, it would mean that you, as the father and the mother, abide by these same rules. It's not that you have a separate rule for your children and a separate rule for you. That will never fly, Okay? So you have to have the same rules. And delete social media apps from your phone. Right? If it's that much of a problem, delete it. If it's not going to be there, you're going to have less temptation to access it. Third thing, set limits for yourself and your family. I've been trying this. I've been discussing social media for the last 3 weeks. And I never advise something that I myself don't try. Right? So what I've been doing, so if, for example, if I want to go onto Facebook, it's 1:23, I'll tell myself you only have till 1:30. Right? I set short increments, and it's amazing how fast those 7 minutes go. Yeah, with that infinite scroll that we talked about. But at 1:30, I have to force myself to put the gadget down. Right? Set time limits. Right? You set an hour, each child gets 15 minutes, and this is what we're going to be using. And when that time is met, you must reward your children for that. Yeah? You must reward your family for that. And when that time is not met, you must deprive something from your family for that. And yourself, right? Turn off instant pop-ups on your devices. What sometimes attracts us is the fact that we will get a message saying, look at your phone. Turn those off. And lastly, get a hobby. Yeah? Get something else that you haven't been doing or have never done to replace this social media. These are just some things that we can do. But I think over the last 8 years, this may have been the most important material that I've talked about since now, right? Because we are seeing a drastic change in the mindset of our children. We are seeing a drastic inability to function in society because they are so used to being in their gadgets the entire time. We need to work together as a community and collectively to try and change the course that we're going. And inshallah, if God gives us the strength and the ability, we'll be able to make a difference for ourselves and our families and communities. وآخر دعوان أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العلي العظيم.